When the encounter begins, Halion will surround himself with a wall of fire, enclosing the raid within the charred circle on the ground. At the pole, I place my demonic circle just inside this ring where the firewall will be. This is because of fiery combustion. Halion will cast this debuff at random players during this phase, and when the debuff ends or is dispelled, it leaves a circle of fire under the player it was cast on and knocks back anyone around. The size of this patch is determined by how long it took to remove the debuff, which is why it's important to move out of the raid as quickly as possible and drop the combustion in a safe place. Most raids place their combustions behind Halion, or stagger them left and right. With my demonic circle near the edge of the ring, I can move out of the raid quickly if I get the debuff. The best way to deal with combustion is to be mindful of boss timers and know where you're going before he casts it. This way you're not caught off guard. Also remember that Halion has a tail swipe and a cleave, so you'll need to be careful when dropping combustion behind or in front of him. Our tank turns him toward or away from the wall, depending on which side we're dropping them to give us more room. The other ability that you need to worry about in this phase is Meteor Strike. Halion calls down a meteor, marked on the ground by what looks like a hellfire graphic. When it hits, it kills anyone within its strike zone and spawns fire that snakes off in 4 random directions. To deal with meteors, our raid stacks in a group and moves side to side away from meteors as they fall. Remember that Halion will continue to cast combustion, so drop your circles against the wall according to what side your raid is on. In heroic mode, when a meteor strikes, it spawns a living inferno, which is picked up by a tank and kited away from fire behind the raid. Smaller adds, called living embers, are also spawned. These will likely be picked up by a tank or plate DPS and AoE'd down by the ranged. They grow when they're in contact with the fire on the ground, so if you have aggro on any, make sure they're out of the flames. Once these small adds are dead, quickly burn down the living inferno and return to the boss. These adds are only spawned in 25-man heroic mode. In 10-man heroic, there are no adds. At 75%, Halion goes from the physical realm to the Twilight realm. This realm is accessed by the portal he spawns. Make sure that you don't enter before your tank does. This phase has a mechanic very similar to fiery combustion from phase 1, called soul consumption. If it's cast on you, run out of the raid to the wall directly behind where your raid is grouped. The circle it spawns when it's dispelled sucks in anyone nearby and reduces their movement speed. This is dangerous because of Halion's second ability in this phase, called Twilight Cutters. Around the edges of the room are blue orbiting spheres. Periodically, a beam will appear between them. As the orbs rotate, so will the beam, killing any players that it moves through. Be mindful of boss timers and be ready to move with the raid away from the beam. It's possible that Halion will cast soul consumption while the beam is active. Don't panic, just run toward the back wall at a slight diagonal so that you stay ahead of the beam. Soul consumption deals shadow damage, so it's helpful to use Shadow Ward if you get this debuff, especially because there's an aura in the Twilight realm that deals constant shadow damage to the entire raid. In heroic mode, instead of just 2 orbiting spheres, there are 4. This creates 2 perpendicular beams. This means you have less space to maneuver and need to be more careful about your position as the beams spawn. This is true of both 10 and 25 man. At 50%, Halion will gain Twilight Division, allowing him to exist in both the physical realm and the Twilight realm at once. At this point, the raid needs to split. At the top of your screen, you'll see a percentage for Halion's corporeality. If Halion takes more damage in the physical realm than in the Twilight realm, this percentage will drop below 50%. When this happens, he deals less damage in the physical realm and more in the Twilight realm. If the percentage rises, this means that Halion is taking more damage in the Twilight realm than the physical, and is hitting harder in the physical realm. If you are in the physical realm, slow DPS when the percentage is below 50. If you're in the Twilight realm, slow DPS if the percentage is above 50. The goal in this phase is to keep his corporeality at 50%. To make this easier, when his corporeality shifts, he takes more or less damage depending on whichever realm is behind, allowing them to catch up. Keep in mind that Halion will continue to cast Fiery Combustion and Meteor Strike in the physical realm, and Soul Consumption and Twilight Cutters in the Twilight realm. In heroic mode, the circles left by Fiery Combustion and Soul Consumption are visible in both realms. This greatly limits the amount of room the raid has to maneuver and requires a lot more coordination. Your raid will need to work out a system so that combustions aren't dropped in the path of those in the Twilight realm.